Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first installment of our five-part CFO virtual panel presentation series. Today's session is brought to you by our good friends at Taulia. I'd like to introduce now our moderator, Peter Lucas. Peter is a senior conference producer for our finance portfolio. Peter.
Thank you, Craig. It's with great pleasure that we kick off our five-session series with today's panel focusing on empowering finance transformation in the face of disruption to win competitive advantage. This is a very relevant topic, especially given the extreme marketplace disruption caused by the coronavirus pandemic. But each of our CFO online panel presentations will have several end-user practitioners along with a moderator. We'll spend about 30 minutes or so with panel questions from the moderator, followed by about 15 minutes of audience Q&A. Before we introduce today's topic and panelists, just a few words about our presentation. Everyone is muted by default, but we'll have the chat box open where you can type in your questions for our panel. We'll also have a couple poll questions related to finance transformation. We'll launch those, give you a little bit of time to respond, and then comment on the results to the audience. Now, a little bit about the background on our topic, empowering finance transformation in the face of disruption to win competitive advantage. The weather precipitated by a global pandemic like the coronavirus, or a major transaction, a financial restatement, rocketing costs, new system rollout, leadership changes, or some other source of marketplace disruption, CFOs know that effective finance transformation is critical to adapt to the changing needs of their enterprise and remain competitive in the marketplace. And during the course of my research for this series, I discovered that there are five main reasons why enterprise finance transformations fail. One is sometimes they're flawed. There's a flawed strategic alignment. Sometimes there's not enough value created by the process. Sometimes the technology is poorly implemented or rolled out. Sometimes the talent is not skilled for the transformation. And sometimes the CFO or the finance office looks at the process as a one-off kind of initiative and misses opportunities for continuous improvement. So to successfully empower your enterprise finance transformation, you'll need to address each of these issues effectively, no matter where you're at on the journey. Today's panel will help give you insights on how to target enterprise value creation transformation and not just cost reductions, how to leverage technology to eliminate silos and integrate systems, how to evaluate skills, capabilities, and needs of the finance organization, put the right people in the right places. So we're really honored today to kick this series off with a great panel. And I'd like to begin by introducing them one by one. First, I'd like to introduce you to Gaurav Malik, the regional CFO at Quest Diagnostics.
Hey, Peter, thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Okay, great. So thanks for having me. My name is Gaurav Malik, and I've been with Quest for a little over a year. Before that, I spent about 20 years with GE, various roles, was a quality Six Sigma Master Black Belt, did FP&A, and most recently I've been a CFO for the Greater Midwest region for Quest Diagnostics.
Thank you, Gaurav. Next, I would like to introduce to you Lowell Mora. He is the CFO and EVP of Cummins-Allison. Lowell?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lowell Mora. I'm currently the CFO for Cummins-Allison. We're a business that manufactures, distributes, services, equipment in the currency and coin sorting industries. I've spent, probably the last, call it 30 years or so now, working primarily for privately held businesses. So I come at things a little differently. I don't have a lot of the Sarbanes-Oxley curve, more of a operating CFO partner. So when Gaurav and I started talking, we had some coming at things from different ways and came to the same answers. Started my career with Arthur Andersen, been with several good international companies in in mostly equipment businesses, Tetra Pak, Amaral, Beltec, Bizerba, and now Cummins-Allison. So looking forward to a lively and interesting discussion today.
Thanks, Lowell. And then I'd like to also introduce you to Darcy Douglas. Darcy is the Vice President of Professional Services at Taulia, Inc.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for having me today. I am Darcy Douglas. I work for Taulia, which is a company in the financial technology space. We offer working capital management solutions, both funded by third parties and funded by our customers. We also offer solutions that help manage our supply chain information and electronic invoicing. I'm responsible for the global implementations of our applications at our customer sites, both by an internal team of professional services and all of the partners that I help to bring on to help us implement our software. I'm excited to be here and bring a little bit different perspective. While I'm not a CFO myself, I do work with many companies and their CFOs to implement our technology. So thanks for having me.
Very good. Welcome all. We're very pleased to have you here today. So let's begin our panel discussion, shall we? First question I'd like to ask you is a two-part question. Probably top of mind for everyone right now is, how are you overcoming disruption from the coronavirus pandemic to power your finance transformation process? And Gaurav, I don't know if you want to take that one first.
Sure. So, as some of the participants would know, that Quest Diagnostics is really at the tip of the spear when it comes to COVID pandemic, for the reason that we are in the business of lab testing. So if you think about our base business, we're doing a lot of stuff right in the field. And one of the reasons why we feel this disruption is as much an opportunity to help the patients, but also to take stock of how the business will operate going forward. We feel like this is an opportunity for us to be kind to our people, to be thoughtful about our clients, and at the end of the day, still believe in America. Because in the past, when we've reported our numbers, there's a very financial swing to a lot of stuff. Now, as we operate in this environment, I'm expecting all of my team members to start thinking of them like a COOs. They're no longer a CFO. They need to be the right-hand person to the department leaders. They should be providing them with insights. They should be providing them with real-time decision-making tools. And I am feeling confident about the bounce back that's happened. If you would have asked me the same question about a week back, I would have had a much difficult way of answering this. But now I feel like, we've learned how to live with this pandemic and work around it. And finance becomes more and more important every day. So I think if our transformation was a good to have in somebody's eyes, I think it has become absolutely necessary as we move through this crisis.
Very interesting.
Lowell, do you want to add something?
I'm sorry. How about you, Lowell? What's your perspective?
Yeah, so our business is in a very different position than Quest, obviously. Depending on our customer bases, some of them have been deemed essential industries like banking, credit unions, and that. But is business down there? Absolutely. One of our verticals, which is gaming, gambling, casinos, is completely shut down. So we're seeing dramatic changes, and this is similar. It harkens back, and as we get a little bit older and we've gone through these things, going through the 2008, 2009, whatever we call it, the Great Recession, I can harken back to what were the intentions of the business at that time and the owners of the business, and where did they want to take that business? And we took a certain tack and essentially protected the bottom line, had minimal layoffs, and went from there. Our business right now is saying basically the same thing. We're trying to look at it the same position as how do we position ourselves for when we come out of this downturn? You know, a lot of people are talking about that V. I don't believe we're going to be a V. I think we're going to be kind of a squiggle over. But, you know, how do you minimize the impact to the employee? I mean, first and foremost is the safety of people and employees. You don't want to lose lives. It's so much table stakes that you don't even really need to say that. But after that, how do you enable using we're using a lot of temporary layoffs. We have 450 service technicians around the country, and our service volume is running at about 30%. So we're using temporary layoffs because we don't want to be in a position where we don't get the skilled and technical people back when it's time. How can we utilize unemployment? You know, there's no stock answer. It comes to, luckily with Cummins, I'm sitting in a room with the owners of the company and we're saying, okay, how do we want to take this? What's our tact? We've got a very long-term perspective. So there's not a stock answer, and it depends on where you are, you know, in that organization. So.
Hey, Peter.
Yeah.
Peter,
Sure.
I'd like to say something. I think that COVID ID and the situation we're in has really been a compelling event for many companies that we work with to say, you know, how do we utilize technology and automation better? If you would have asked me, you know, 4 months ago, would electronic invoicing become sexy again? I would have said, no way. It's just not important to people. You know, they'll deal with the paper if they have to. And now we see many companies who are you know, begging us, how quickly can we get this implemented? So I think as we plan for the future and how our workforce works from home if needed, technology and automation is just critically important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because it, you know, again, not just in our business environment, but in our entire lives, you know, some things are just going to change and customers and vendors are going to get used to it. So it's an opportunity, depending where you are in your journey of financial transformation, how can you make things happen more quickly? I just think about, you know, the change in the way we're going to get delivered food and grocery and Instacart and all these different things, you know, Zoom, how is that taking off and these types of things? So it's being positioned and all the things we've done in the past. Now you have to capitalize on those in the face of everything else.
Very good.
I think to Darcy's point, I think automation and digitization is just the way to go. Part of it is things that my team was doing once every month, we're doing twice a day. We want to get that information now, quicker, faster. Things that we used to sit together as a committee in a room and taking decisions, we're making those decisions every 4 hours. Now, how do we learn to operate in that environment? And I'll give you an example. You know, so just like to Lowell's point, we had a lot of people, and it was all voluntary. We asked people if they are willing to sit home and not take their paychecks. And a lot of people, and that's what surprised me about this country and the company and the culture. A lot of people raised their hand and said they will participate. Now, 6 weeks have happened, and we're starting to get volume back. Now, how do you create a prioritization to bring these people back? So have somebody, her job every day in the morning is to run yesterday's volume, see what's coming back, what doctor's offices is open, where is there more demand, and reprioritize. Just a phenomenal work of art, and this was never taught in the MBA to restart a company. So we took a pause. We're setting up new processes on the fly. We're making decisions. We're making mistakes. But like I said before, we're being kind to people and we're trying to be able to match the demands of the clients. And this is only possible, Darcy, to your point, and Lowell, to your point, if we can put some digitization. We cannot do this manually. This old school thinking about doing things manually once a month and hoping somebody reads it, those are days of the past. I don't think those days are returning anytime soon.
Agreed. Very interesting. This is the second part of that question. You know, given our topic, empowering finance transformation in the face of disruption, and the major global disruption of the COVID-19 pandemic, where would you say your organization is at now in your finance transformation process? Beginning stages, maybe mid-stage, advanced, next iteration? Just kind of curious before we launch a poll question to our audience. How are you guys doing at Quest Diagnostics, Gaurav?
So I would give ourselves maybe a 6 out of 10. I think we made a good start, but then there's a long, long road in front of us. And the challenge that I feel every single day is this urgent or is this important? And urgent things are the things that me and my team does every day without missing a beat. But when it is an important stuff, which if you don't do it for a week or if you don't do for 2 weeks, nothing happens, right? So how do you prioritize important stuff over urgent stuff? And that's the challenge that I face every day with my team. And that's why I'm giving myself 6 out of 10. When I joined the organization, I said there are 2 things that are very critical for our business. One, and this is from a finance standpoint, and I said, number 1, we need to be operating much more efficiently. And I used a term, it's called follow the sun. Not a new term, but many companies use it. I hired a bunch of people, and we had a center in India, and we say every night when you go leave work over here, you put work in the mailboxes of the people who get up and follow the sun, because the sun comes out over there. They work overnight, and they work overnight when we are sleeping, and when we come back, there's a window, and we get so much more efficient doing that. Just work like a charm. People liked it. Initially, there was a little bit of a pushback, thinking, is my job at risk? Is it being done for any other reason? But as they started to see value, they liked it. The second piece I said was a lot of repetitive tasks need to go into automation, into UiPaths, into Tableau, things that we can use as tools, so that our job as finance is less about punching data and more about taking decisions, more about finding insights. A lot of my team members have been UiPath certified. It's one of the softwares that we chose as a company to be used for robotics. But I just struggle sometimes, because back in the day, the analogy was garbage in, garbage out. Today, when you talk to a Siri, today when you talk to your Amazon device, you can ask the time in whatever format, and chances are you'll get the same answer. So now, every day, the changes that are happening in the organization, how do we build that, automation and a little bit of, business intelligence, which I feel like we can do a better job. We do, on an average, just in my region, we do about 80,000 tests. All of these 80,000 requisition, all of these comes with at least 4 tests on it. 320,000 data points are collected every single day, and each of that data point have at least 100 more attributes to it. So the amount of data that we are getting every day, we don't want to be a company which goes out and tells the doctor, well, somebody's hemoglobin is low. We want to be the company who goes out to the people and say, your hemoglobin is low, but your same patient has this issue as well, and correlate historical data and try to give an insight to a clinician. And I think finance has a role in it, because finance see these numbers a little bit better than others. And 2 is finance can commercialize some of these ideas. So I think the role of finance is changing. And from a transformation standpoint, it cannot be a one and done. It's a journey. It has to be done every day. That's my view.
Interesting. How about you, Lowell?
Well, I would say, as compared to Quest, I'm probably in the caveman days. I joined Cummins-Allison about a year ago, and as I said, we're a privately owned, family-owned business, owned by the same family for 100 years, and we are very, very profitable, but we haven't progressed necessarily with the times, especially in, call it, processes and finance. To give you an example, when I joined the company, we were still doing expense reports by hand. So we implemented something very simple, such as Concur. We have 43 branches across the country, and still to this day we're working on changing it. They write their local checks by hand and send them into the office. So we're very, very early in that. The one thing I'd like to say is that, every business you get into is at a different place in that journey. The one thing I will say is I came here and I said, we may be inefficient, we may be slow, we may have an old archaic system, but my financials are accurate. They're perfect. I don't have to worry about anything, so I can spend my time working through how do we get to that next level. My goal is, talk a lot about RPA and AI and all these things. I think, and Darcy can add to this, I think in 3, 4, 5 years time frame, RPA is just going to be table stakes. Everybody's going to be using it. I'm not smart enough to know about AI and all these other things and all that, but I'm gunning towards RPA. So, you have to look at that. You have to take into consideration our business is very loyal to employees. We still have somebody, we're still implementing a lockbox from the bank. When I asked them where the lockbox came, they said, what's a lockbox? So, you have to take into consideration where the head of the organization is. And our chairman says to me all the time, Lowell, slow down, slow down. You have to take this a little more sequentially. But when you have financials in good shape, I've gone to situations where I couldn't publish a financial statement. I joined Bizerba in 2014. The financial statements were garbage, so I had to start from ground zero. So it just depends where you are in that transformation. So that's my insight right now. And having this impact to the economy and the world will allow some of these things to happen more quickly once we get our feet back underneath us.
Very good. Darcy, I don't know if you'd like to add to that, maybe the CFOs that you speak with and clients that you work with, where would you say they're at in their finance transformation process for the most part?
Our focus is really on large global 500 companies, so a lot of them have thought a lot about transformation and automation and utilizing technology. I think the problem that they still run into, though, is that how do you do that across a very disparate ERP landscape, right? Getting the data out of all those systems and making sure that technology supports that, so you still aren't left with a lot of manual processes. So I wouldn't say anybody's ever at a 10. As Gaurav said, it's a continuous journey that you're on. But I think as long as you're moving forward each day and getting rid of those manual processes, you're on a good path.
Very good. Why don't we see how the audience is doing with this? I'd like to launch the first poll question, please. And if you just take a moment and check where you're at in your finance transformation journey. See if we can get that going. So if you'd like to kind of indicate where you're at, whether you're about to begin, beginning stages, mid, advanced, go ahead and select that. I think, meanwhile, while we're waiting on that, maybe we'll transition to the next question, which is, when we met together prior to today's session, one of the things that we talked about together was how culture is so important, and to align with your finance transformation process. How are you helping to transform your company's culture to align with your finance transformation process at Quest and at Cummins-Allison?
Well, you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I think I started alluding to it, in our earlier conversations. But our organization is kind of, in some ways, very, very archaic. And I'll ask my controller or my accountants, why do we do it that way? Well, we started doing that way when I got here, and I said, well, you've been here for 27 years. So it's been an environment of not necessarily progressing and changing. So, when I came in, I was very clear that, anybody who's going to be valuable and wants to change is going to be with the organization. But we need to become more modern, more efficient, to do things differently. And again, I have I've got in this position, I have the luxury of probably having management not as eager to change things as I am. So I can do things at a pace, and they're probably reining me in a little bit. So you don't feel like you're driving people out. And what I've started in my conversations is, hey, this is going to change. If you want to take a look at what you want to do, no, I want to work 5 more years. But then I've had people come back to me in 6 months and say, you know what, I really thought about it, and I'm not really up for what you're going to do. Can we put a plan in place where I'll retire in 6 months? I have the luxury to have the transition and all that. But, it comes back to, how do you change a culture? I mean, one person can't change a culture. It has to be a collective effort. And luckily in my business, we have management wants to change. They just, the people around me want to change. They just don't necessarily know how to do it. And if you can, the only way you can do that is by gaining respect and credibility from the organization. It's very, very simple. Do what you say what you're going to do, and then do what you say you're going to do. Gain credibility. Let the people know that you have their back. Stand up if there's bad actors in the organization and people have been afraid to do anything. Take action. Don't be afraid. So that's how you lead it, and it takes time. And I've done it several times. And then all of a sudden, I had the luxury of being the CFO and COO for one of our businesses, and I was the top management team member in a location. And after 2 years, I walked around and I said, well, this place, this culture has changed. And it's because of the environment. It's silly things like walking in and saying hello to everybody in the morning, asking them how their weekend was. How are the kids? Do you really care? And you can't remember everybody's names and all that stuff, but it's being a caring person. And that's how you change a culture. And that's how you get them to follow or to get on board, not follow, get on the train for these transformations that are going to happen. So that's my kind of take on it.
Yeah, I think for me, culture is all about being connected and keeping everyone at the company connected. And I know ever since I was a little girl, I don't do well with people just telling me what to do. I like to be a part of the thinking, part of the decisions, and then I buy into it a lot more. So I think not just telling people what the changes are going to be, but involving them in the discussions, getting their ideas, and then really making them part of the process helps. And change management is all about the people, right? We can put new plans and processes in place, but if people are not behind it, then it won't go anywhere. They'll fall back into their old habits. So it's, how do you keep people connected? How do you keep them feeling like they're part of the decision, and that truly they understand the why behind we're doing this, not just the what. What is the value that it brings to our company? What's the value it brings to me and my job? And what's the value it brings to our customers?
Interesting.
I think whatever Darcy and Lowell said, I mean, there's hardly anything I can add more to it, but all I can say is once you have a shared vision, you can transform a large group of people when they feel their contribution is larger than their individual role. You start to change an organization. And I'll give you an example. Every year we have this budgeting thing in which we go to our headquarters. We say we can do this number. They say no, do this number. So it literally happened to me. I was like first year in the job, first time going through the process. We went back and we said we're going to do $960 million, which is a 2-3% improvement and things like that. And that's like culturally that we've always done that. They come back and they said, no, let's do a $985 million. So I thought about it. And I said, one of those, just talking to my GM, and they're like, we always cut the difference. We just find a number which is between 985, 960, make it as a target, move on. So I had to somehow convince him. He said, you know what? I think the underlying assumption is if they give me a bigger number, I'll work harder. So how about I do this? Let's rally the organization to $1 billion. Let's not worry about 960 or 985, and let's look at a number called billion. And you'll be surprised how many times I stood with the people and I just completely refuted my own numbers and said, no, this is conservative people taking conservative actions, very mediocre. We're gonna go for $1 billion. Again, we were off to a great start and then COVID happened, so completely derailed it. But sometimes when you take those hard calls, you just create that environment because you have a shared purpose. Two, for culture, I would say something that Lowell said, just stick with me. It's like people have been doing the same thing for 27 years. I want to go and aggressively identify people who know how to do a certain process very well, keep it in their brains, and create a black box for the entire organization. I would rather fail and not have those people or win just being a slave to the process that I have no idea how it's run. So we need to bring those things out. And when your team starts feeling that there's a culture of safety, you mean well, there's a shared purpose, I think the culture of the team starts to improve as it is. So when you talk about finance, it's so touchy feeling because you're talking culture on one side and numbers on the other. How do you bring these two together by creating that relationship and just then transform it? And the last thing I would say is culture is not about you. Culture is sometimes not even about the organization. Culture is about the team. Culture is about, I tell my team, and again, some of them are on this chat, but I tell my team that I cannot guarantee you employment. But if you work for me for 2 or 3 years, you'll be employable for the rest of your lives because I'm going to give you praise, I'm going to give you promotions, I'm going to give you paychecks, I'm going to give you recognition. If you put all of these together, I think we'll be a better team. So I think that's a culture you build. That's what I learned in my previous organization for 20 years. Just happy and grateful to be a part of this great company called Quest. I feel like I'm still very pumped up, despite what's happening in the outside. I'm still very pumped. Once we open up, we will bounce back very quickly.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So it sounds like what I'm hearing, to transform your company culture, it's why, not just what. You need to communicate that you care. You need to communicate an inspiring vision at the individual level, and then find a way to bring numbers and culture together for synergy. So let me ask you guys another question, and we're rapidly running out of time, and I'd like to get to the audience's questions. How are you leveraging technologies to eliminate silos and integrate systems? So, we're talking about empowering your finance transformation process in spite of all kinds of disruption, help getting the culture in alignment with the strategic initiative. But then there's the technology piece. We talked about at the beginning of this, one of the key failure points is poorly implemented technology. So how are you leveraging technologies to eliminate silos and integrate systems at Quest and at Cummins-Allison?
Why don't you go ahead, Gaurav? Mine's going to be much more remedial than yours on the system side.
Oh, come on, Lowell. You're being very, very kind and very humble. But I'll go first. I think the systems are, Lowell talk about Concur, right? We have a Concur as well. We get reporting. We put in a lot of, as you try to put in something and say, I did a lunch with a client and it was $400, it will pop up right away saying it is above your limit. If you go and try and book a flight, it will immediately say you have a cheaper flight available. What's your reason? So a lot of decision making and a lot of business rules are getting implemented within the system, and that's when it becomes effective. Is when you can push those decision making at the keystroke level, at the point of making decision level, versus trying to create a bigger strategy much later down the road. So the traditional way is you get your report for T&E, you review your report, you you ask, why did you spend $400 on a client dinner? It was above the policy. But by then, the damage is done, right? Somebody's already done that. If you would have done it at the time, much better. So one of the things that I'm expecting now is Concur does a good job of telling me whose flight was, there was a cheaper flight, but you didn't take one. I want to get that report of what are the next 10 days, 15 days of flights that have been booked in the organization where you can find people who are not complying with it. And that's a good time for them to ask, why are you going and to Montana and to Billings when you can go somewhere? When you ask those questions, the answers that you get will be phenomenal. There's a client need. This does not work with my kid's schedule. These are all logic and valid questions. And then you become more empathetic and not just look about the numbers. So I think to answer your question, Peter, we need to put all the business rules as much as possible within the environment that you're working, so that least amount of work needs to be done in the back end. And as we get more and more integrated with the technology, I think the output will be better. So I always say a smart CFO is one who can connect operational levers to financial performance. Say, if you don't hire, I will have less salaries cost. It's so simple, but we forget that people keep hiring and then we expect your salaries to be low, and it doesn't happen like that. So how do you manage and connect those simple things to see how we can have a better output in the ledger? Well,
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the points you and I talked about the first time we met, and I keep coming back to it, and you can talk about empowering and getting all these new financial tools. For me, and this is where I'm in my organization, goes back to laying out the processes, fixing the processes that don't work. I'm not even at the point, I implemented Concur, that's easy. You would have thought that I was, taking people's firstborn child when we were implementing Concur. But I'm working on a process. I happen to have the customer service organization reporting to me more of the order entry people. And I have a proactive customer service manager who always say, I want to change this. And I'll say, well, change it. Well, sales won't do it. I said, well, find out a way to get sales to do it, or don't give them a choice. Just say, you are used to getting this physical reports. I'm not giving you that physical report anymore. I'm sending it to you electronically. Push the envelope. Don't, have that courage to push it. So, I'm not exactly answering the question, which I do all the time, but to me, it's all about, processes. You got to put that process in place. And I'm the least, if any of my friends or former colleagues or employers are on there, I don't follow any of the rules because I put processes in place. So when we need to bend them and break them, we can to service our customer. But if you're in a position where you don't have any processes, you got to put those processes, or if these processes are in people's heads, or if they're broken, but so that's kind of how I'm coming at it. I'm not really answering your question. I'll let Darcy talk about the technology piece of it, because I'm not at that point. So.
Well, Lowell, I'm a process fanatic, so I appreciate those comments as well. I think for me, the things I see with my customers are they forget about, as they're sponsoring or implementing technology with their own organization, who are the internal stakeholders that they need to bring into this process. And sometimes we don't have enough conversations with all those stakeholders to get their buy-in. So I come on site, I'm having the workshop, and I've got a couple of departments in the room, but IT is missing, and it's like, if we don't have buy-in from all these internal stakeholders that they're going to dedicate their time and their resources and they're on board for this change, the technology is never going to be successful. So the earlier you can get that internal alignment within your company, even if you think, oh, this doesn't matter to our customer service team, it matters. It matters, and involve them in those steps, and it will be much more successful.
Yeah, but I go back to Lowell, and you got to give yourself credit for bringing up process. I mean, the fundamental of process mapping is you reduce the variation and move the mean, right? Till the time there is so much variation, everybody's doing everything their own way, and there's no process, chances of that entire process, that entire department, that entire book of business improving is just not possible. If you have 5 rockstar salespeople who do not follow Salesforce.com at all and do their own stuff in their own way, I mean, chances are you will fail because as a finance guy, you need to know when the deals are coming, what stage the deal is, what is the concession that's going to happen. There is a method to the madness. So again, I love people who are brave enough, like you, Lowell, to say, I love the process, but I like to bend them. So I appreciate your approach because we need more of that in the finance group. A lot of our finance teams, and again, including myself sometimes, lack the courage to stand up and say that process sucks. That is not the right process. And part of the reason is it's been happening for 20 years. You've joined an organization. Calling a process incorrect is like calling the entire institution, like, saying your baby is ugly. And how do you live with that, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Interesting. So there sounds like we're looking at it from different perspectives, but maybe it's the same end goal, whether it's applying business rules on the back end, process mapping to gain internal alignment, all good stuff. Let's take a question from the audience here for the panel. And if there are others in the audience, if you'll type your questions into the chat box, we'll try to get to all of them with the remaining time that we have. So this is for the panel. Can you talk about how you might take an agile approach to digital transformation and how you are helping the people effectively work through organizational changes?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead, Gaurav.
So maybe I'm saying the book name correct. I think it was Lean Startup. Eric Ries. Eric Ries wrote that book, and it was all about failing fast. And the agile technology, just the methodology, tells us about failing fast. You cannot move forward till the time you take your first step. And a lot of times you will dangle, you will fall, but you have to take the next first step. And when I look at agile technology, it's just a culture of building safety. Tell your teams it's okay to fail. Come up with, it is not the quality of idea that matters sometimes, it's the quantity of ideas. If your team is not coming up and telling you, Gaurav, how do you think about this? Or this is an idea I want to implement. And the team doesn't feel like that they are empowered to do that. You'll be surprised that you will not be able to make progress because transformation is not not happening from my chair, not even from my boss's chair. The transformation is happening with every lab person who's holding a requisition in their hand, trying to do the right thing and hoping the data enter financial system and we pick it up. So when I think about agile technology, there are certain things we cannot miss on in finance, right? We cannot have a bad balance sheet. We cannot misstate our books. So there are certain kosher things that we don't want to touch. But for all others, let's not grandfather in the Sarbanes-Oxley and SOX and in order everything else to the entire organization. When I was in GE, I just like, well, I'm just not a trained accountant. I was a master black belt, and on the floor somebody came in and he said there was a play area on the other side, and they used to call it the moonshine shop, where there were tools available, there were parts available, and the engineers will go and play over there and try to build new things. Amazing things happened over there. A new CT came out of there, a new ventilator came out of there. That Salt Lake City business Darcy was telling you about, that happened over there as well. So if you do not allow your organization to have an agile mindset of driving change, in which they have some tools, some projects that they can do on the side, and it will not be brought up in their annual review that you failed in this, right? We're very good at that sometimes, right? We give them project and then we measure them on that project. And sometimes if we don't like someone, we give them a harder project. How do you build that culture in which people are okay to fail? So I like that. So I read that book. I try to implement it every day. I've been successful with most teams. It's just my daughter I'm struggling with these days, but someday I'll get there as well.
Well, I mean, you set me up nicely there because I have 3 daughters, so I don't win at home ever. I don't have any of the right answers, so I can talk about that forever. as you see that I kind of do here, I take the question and, whether it's digital transformation or any transformation in the organization, the key question or word there was agile. And you touched on a lot of this, Gaurav. You've got to make decisions, you've got to take action, and you've got to not be willing to fail. You got to empower your people to do that. And I talk about one of the things that I love about working for privately held businesses. You go into those, they usually have a much longer term perspective. They're not reporting quarter to quarter. They don't have a stock price. It's different initiatives. It's gaining long-term value, enterprise value, rather than maximizing short-term value. But I look around and I say, but that doesn't mean you can't and shouldn't act with a sense of urgency. So I got a million things. If you talk to my daughter, they would say, he says all those things all the time. So you can act with a sense of urgency with a mid to long-term perspective, right? You don't have to just, because we don't have as much pressing demand, that doesn't mean that you act slowly. You don't act like a sense of urgency. And you touched on the other great part is don't be afraid to make a mistake. I remember one of my last roles, I had a director of my supply chain. He was a super analytical guy, which was good to bounce off of me because I make decisions quickly. This guy could not make a decision to save his life. If there were 100 facts to get, he was going to get 102 facts to make that decision. I just said, Justin, stop, make a decision. And then if it's the wrong decision, we retrench and go from there. So you touched on a key thing is empower the team, but then don't beat the crap out of them if it's not the right thing. It's courage. It's take that risk because I'm willing to go back to somebody and say, this is the best decision I made with the information data pool I had, and it wasn't right. I didn't spend a little money. I did this, but let's retrench and fix it. So it's kind of courage. And then when you show your employees or your teams that you're going to have their back, then you're going to have that value all along. So I didn't really answer the question, but I thought it was interesting.
I think for me, agile as far as implementing technology means breaking things up into small chunks that you can be successful at right away and then iterating on that first chunk each time to get better. So when we do implementations, we like to look at where are we going to make the most value for the company, for the employees. How can we go live with just a small change first to just show that big win and get people excited about what's to come. If we wait and do a big bang approach of 17 ERP systems and all the, the players that are a part of that, it doesn't happen. So we always aim for having that big win and celebrate it with our customers. And then they're more excited to keep going and keep adding more and more to it.
Sounds good.
In fact, there was a question, Darcy. I mean, somebody's yesterday when I was late at filling out the template that IQPC had, and but somebody was kind enough to ask me questions and take it down. One of the questions was, how much budget do you have for transformation? And my response was unlimited, because as long as you can show value, it should be a no-brainer. If we have a good idea that can be commercialized, then we don't need a budget for it. I think no organization will stop unless you have $1 billion idea. Then that's a different story. But to the agile part of it, you start small and you take big actions over a period of time. You don't start big and then get yourself bogged down with small actions.
Very, very true.
Interesting. Another question that came in. Let's see what the panel has to say. What comments do you have for local government financial officers, municipal or county, who also must plan financial transitions? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I kind of have this simplistic theory that any organization kind of has their own dynamics and their own processes, but at the core, they're probably fairly similar, right? I'm guessing the person to that question works for a government office, but if you take it all the way down to your simplest organization, like your PTO at your school, right? That has its own politics, its own things, and maybe they don't need a financial transformation, but you have to have the right buy-in. I would guess that municipal or county offices probably have lower budgets, so you probably have to be a bit more creative. But I always say when there's a will, there's a way. Maybe a small municipality is not going to be able to go and hire Darcy and Taulia, but they might be able to come up with other homegrown or other technologies to transform it. And I keep driving back to the process. You start with that process and you say, how can I take manual steps out of this process, and not necessarily to get rid of to cut headcount, which sometimes happens, but how do I empower the people in my organization to be focusing on more added value function than transactional? I'm leading on one of the things I love talking about, Peter, but that's kind of how I would approach it. So,
listen, I'm in Illinois County, so I have my view to this is just two simple rules. Spend less than you make, right? That's going to be helpful. If you spend more than you make, then that's going to get you in trouble. And collect faster than you pay your suppliers, right? So manage your cash and manage your P&L, you'll be fine. Unfortunately, a lot of government agencies on the other side have a large tranche of funding. If it's federal, they can print money. If it's state, they can beg money. But unfortunately, in a business environment, those things are not true. We have shareholders' money. We have to respond. There are owners' money on Lowell side that we have to make sure that there is good value and good return going through. So stick to the basics, because a lot of times I see the waste that is out there. We work with certain health plans that are government in nature, and just the amount of time they reject our claim. And when we do the paperwork again, and we were doing one of those Kaizens, and I asked them, how much time does it take for the paperwork to happen? And they're like, well, that's not a big deal. But again, we have to print like 45 or 50 pages of some transaction, print it out, put it in USPS mail, put a stamp on it, send it to them. Just sometimes it's easier to just say the transaction is just done. So again, combining your operational acumen with your finances for any organization, not just government, is very, very critical.
Okay. I think we have time for maybe one more question. How should the CFO communicate the value of finance transformation to key stakeholders?
To me, so we have this monthly review, and where we go, we are one of the 6 regions, so we go with our results to our headquarters and say, this is what we did last month. And when the leaders around see the quality of the deck, the preparation, the understanding of the numbers, they're wowed. And it's just like you go to a hotel or a restaurant, for example. I learned in Lean Six Sigma called quality functional deployment. A lot of time a customer doesn't know what they want. You go to a restaurant, you get a meal, you come back, and you suddenly feel good about that restaurant that you want to go back. Sometimes you get the same meal in a different restaurant, you don't want to go back over there. And we do this tool about what is driving that effectiveness for one organization versus the other. And a lot of times our leaders do not know what they want till the time you show the value of that. So if you have automated processes, if you have digital processes, and you're able to connect the operational levers with your financial results, and it is at a click of a button or at a very fast turnaround time, suddenly that's the best communication. Not to tell them by words, but tell them by action and tell them by results, more importantly. So that's the way I approach it. Is I do some of my discussions about digitization, about transformation, unfortunately, is limited only to my team because I have to bite what I can chew. If I go out and just drum up a transformation thing that I'm trying to do, guess what? I'm just going to confuse the organization because it's not valid for everybody in the organization. But my results should speak. My team's turnover should speak. The quality of work that comes out of my team should speak. The owners, the department owners should say, my team is doing a great job. I mean, that to me is transformation of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same type. I agree with Gaurav a lot on sometimes people are used to getting information in a certain format and they don't know that they need or want something different. And it's just because they haven't asked for it or nobody's stepped up to do it. And, you know, I came into this organization and I told you these books and records were rock solid, perfect. The auditors love us because they come and they audit, it's done, it's clean, there's no adjustments. You know, our previous CFO had been there for many, many years, but he would give out a financial pack this thick every month to everybody. And no, I looked at it. So I look at an income statement. I look at the balance sheet. Where's my cash? I don't have a cash flow statement. Why? How can I not have a cash flow statement? And so I said, what I do each month is, and started just preparing it, is I put together a 5, 7, 10-page deck that tells the financial story. I mean, it sounds so basic that sometimes people, and you know, the chairman looked at me and said, and he's been running the business for 25 years, this is fantastic. This tells a story. I go, how could you not have had that forever? And then I started putting in some crazy ideas of customer data because I'm a firm believer of, you know, there's usually 10 things you think you know, and there's usually about 8.5 that you know, and the other 1.5 you have wrong. But then when you start showing people data, they'll do it. So it's and I'm not answering it at a financial transformation. I'm answering it at such a basic standpoint, and piling on with what Gaurav was saying is you've got to sometimes, you know, lead the horse to the water and kind of dunk his head in to get him to take that first sip, that person. But, you know, that's your job. And that's our job as finance leaders, not to just keep reporting the same things over and over, but to get people to look at things differently. And again, it ties back to what I said before, not to be afraid to put a report out there and say, well, let's look at this. And then everybody in the room says, that means nothing, it's garbage. Okay, I'll take it out. You won't see it again. Instead of worrying about always being right. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I think there are two things I could add. One is that I think once you think you've communicated enough to your stakeholders, you need to do it 3 times as much, and in different mediums, so whether it's a company meeting, emails, a company intranet, whatever it is, a party, you know, just keep that message coming and over communicate, especially when you're talking about the value and why we're doing this. And then the last thing I would say is, you know, as leaders, we need to walk the walk. You know, Lowell could tell his employee to deliver a report electronically, but then if he turns around and prints out my performance review on paper to go over it with me, I would say, wait a minute, how come you're not digitizing your actions? So I think we have to walk the walk and not just talk the talk.
Very good. Well, we're just about out of time. I'm wondering if each of you have some final thoughts you would like to share with the audience. Any final thoughts?
Darcy, you want to go first this time?
Sure. I'd just like to say I'm on LinkedIn, Darcy Douglas. Happy to connect with anyone here. And if you have further questions or things you'd like to talk about more with me, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I hope that I brought a little bit different perspective of someone who is assisting companies with that technology transformation. And I think, as we said earlier, it's a real opportunity to go ahead and think about what are those internal processes, things we can do better to not only work better today, but prepare ourselves for the future. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, likewise for me, I appreciate the opportunity. Not quite as interactive as sitting in a room, but hopefully added some insights and some value. And, you know, I'm on LinkedIn, email, anybody wants, I think you can tell I love talking about this stuff. And Gaurav and I just met each other. I think we're going to be meeting up for a coffee when we're freed sometime because we have a lot of the same ideas. It was really, really insightful for me to talk with Gaurav and come at it. He comes at it from more of I don't know if you're an engineer or an IT guy, but I call it more of a quant than me and not a true finance guy working for large companies, and me coming at it from a different perspective as that started bootstrapped as an accountant and worked my way up, but we come to the same conclusions just a little differently. So I'm happy to connect with anybody and chat more and go from there. I really appreciate Peter, IQPC, and the opportunity to participate. And if anybody has any ideas on 3 teenage daughters, send them my way.
And I just want to say thank you as well. I mean, just like Lowell's, mentioned, I mean, Darcy, you've been amazing. Lowell, you've been amazing. Thank you, IQPC. I have a big passion for not just talking about stuff, but also driving results, and more importantly, coaching and mentoring individuals. I've been lucky to be a part of GE and now past, where I've had some great leaders who've kind of coached me and mentored me. So I'm available on LinkedIn. I don't know if IQPC will put my email over there, but feel free to reach out to me in any way. And if you have any questions, any ideas, especially if you have ideas about daughters, I have two as well. Do let me know. And I really enjoyed this show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you, Darcy, Lowell, and Gaurav so much, and thank you, audience, for joining us for today's presentation. We're going to leave this room open a little bit for discussion and chat if you'd like to stick around for a bit. Next Wednesday, May 13th, we're going to continue the series with the next topic, Blueprint to Reevaluate and Successfully Adjust Your Finance Transformation Strategy Midstream. We'll feature Viraz Cherian, the CFO of Panasonic Automotive, and Kyra Coker, the VP of Finance at National Roofing Partners. We also have sessions on May 20th, June 3rd, June 10th, all at 1 Eastern, so please make plans to join us. And then you can continue the conversation from today's first session of the CFO Exchange into the next session by following our LinkedIn and Twitter accounts. You can see here. To do this, please take out your phone, open the camera, and scan the QR code of the account that you would like to follow. And then you can continue the conversation with us. Again, thanks so much for joining us for today, and we hope to see you next week.